What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus. Today we are here talking about some waiver wire additions and whatnot. It's Tuesday morning. We just got done watching the most exciting game of your life. Nathan, I'm pretty sure that you were there, covering that game. And if you guys don't know, we have Nathan with us, Nathan Jahnke. He's the one from PFF who is behind the scenes, and he's the one who tracks all these snaps. If you're not following him on Twitter, you need to be, because he brings you all this quality information. Also have Brandon Marianne-Lee with me. At some point, we might have Daniel Kelley.
No quality information. Just kidding.
All quality information. You're my partner. We're gonna get there. But no, I wanted to. Nathan, how fun was it to track the game last night for you? Did we lose? Hello?
To plays in the game that they were at least enjoyable to watch, even if they weren't helping your fantasy team. And then just seeing how much of the Chip Kelly offense transferred to San Francisco, seeing Torrey Smith at right wide receiver almost every snap, Patton at left wide receiver almost every snap. So that's going to really help if they end up being able to have a passing game, knowing which cornerbacks they'll go up against each week.
Yeah, no, it'll definitely be telling. Brandon, you and I were talking. It was hard to stay up through that game last night. I woke up and I saw the video of the fan running across the field, and apparently that was the highlight of the game that I missed, because this was a game where at middle of the third quarter, late third quarter, I passed out. How about you? Did you find any enjoyment in that game? Was there any big takeaways for you?
I would say I was big on Bruce Ellington in the preseason because he was the slot guy, and welcome Jeremy Kerley to being the slot guy. Although tears, because that would have been my guy Bruce, but instead we have Jeremy Kerley. To me, he's one of the top waiver wire ads of the week, 11 targets. He did not score a touchdown. Certainly San Francisco is not great. But again, Jordan Matthews, a ton of work in the slot. I think that's going to translate, like Nathan said, to the San Francisco 49ers in the shape of Jeremy Kerley. And I know this sounds crazy, but we live in a world where Jeremy Kerley and Blaine Gabbert are starting football players in the National Football League, and it's 2016.
No, it's crazy. And they also traded for Rod Streeter. So Rod Streeter's on this team. I don't know how much of an impact he's going to have once he learns the system or whatnot. But no, before jumping into everything wholeheartedly, guys, make sure you're following us on Twitter at PFF_fantasy. We do try and send out links when we go live with the show. So if you guys ever wanted to tune in and ask questions live, I believe we do that under this new YouTube thing. Things are changing with technology. And this is actually the first day where it's going directly to YouTube, I want to say, instead of like the Google Hangout approach. But no, the reason I fell asleep last night, I've been having issues falling asleep, staying asleep, I should say, where I've been getting up 2:30, 3:30 in the morning. I don't know if it's football. I don't know if it's insomnia, but I took 2 Benadryl and it just knocked me out. So I got a good night's sleep. I am ready to rock, ready to talk some waiver wire additions. But let's start with the Chargers. The big news of week one was the injury to Keenan Allen. He tore his ACL, so it's really unfortunate. This guy has never stayed on the field. That's why he's never finished as a top 15 wide receiver. And he's out for the season. But our job right now is to find out which one is going to replace him. I was looking through the snap counts that people like Nathan bring to us, and Dontrell Inman was the leader in snaps on this team at wide receiver. He even had more snaps than Travis Benjamin. But the big name out there is Tyrone Williams. A lot of people thinking that he's going to take over that role. Brandon, let's start with you. I want to hear your take on the situation, on who you think, if someone's going to spend a waiver wire pick, is this one of the top additions, or is this something that you want no part of?
Maybe. I'm going to tell you, first of all, look at your league. Every league is different. I'm getting questions like, should I add Theo Riddick? Should I add Eli Rogers? Random people that I assumed were already taken are on the waivers for a lot of you. And I beg you to look a little bit lower than just the big scorers, because what we're looking at here is that, yes, Tyrell Williams got 71 yards, but he only had 2 catches on 5 targets. So that's, less than 50% and only 2 catches. So, that makes me a little bit nervous. And my problem with Tyrell Williams is that we're not quite sure he is the guy. It could be Dontrell Inman. It could be Travis Benjamin. We're just not entirely sure. You also have to believe in that San Diego offense in general. But certainly, if you're desperate, yeah, sure. He's one of the better ones. Absolutely. There weren't a lot of great new options. A lot of the people are just rookies that most of us already owned or people that we figured would have a role but didn't have a great history yet in the NFL. Not a lot of breakout players, so he's one of the few. I get it, but am I nervous? Yes.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so I'm not sure if you track this game, Nathan. What's your take? Now, is Inman going to kind of be the slot player? He's a big slot receiver. He'd be 6'3", he's just under 200 pounds, I believe. And then you have Tyrone Williams, 6'4", 200 pounds. Like, what role do you see these guys playing? I don't know if you track this game or if you've tracked this team in the past through the preseason. Where do you see this kind of situation going?
I think in 3 wide receiver sets, we'll see all 3 of them. Once Allen went out, all 3 of them were playing every snap. 2 wide receivers, it was Inman, and then a switch between Benjamin and Williams playing into 2 wide receiver sets. So at least that way, that's how the snaps will probably get distributed going forward. I like anyone in this group. It's Benjamin. He probably was already drafted, but if not, I think he's worth a pickup. He did see a lot of targets in this game, even though it didn't result in a lot.
Oh, it sounds like we might be losing Nathan there. Nathan,
Receivers, but
gotcha. So is Inman going to be the slot guy then?
I believe so. I think they'll probably mix it up a little bit, who's in the slot, and not always be consistent with it. But
gotcha.
Probably see the most snaps there.
Well, I mean,
and Travis Benjamin did catch all 7 of his targets, 100% catch rate. He's trustworthy, which is going to be important because, man, they got some real issues on that offensive side.
Yeah, even with Keenan Allen there, I like Travis Benjamin, and I would assume that he's owned on most teams. That's the only reason I didn't bring his name up. But yeah, if he's not owned, he's definitely someone that you should have rostered in your league. One name that I was really shocked heading into week 1 that was not rostered. So I'm doing a piece for PFF every single week talking about top streaming options, and it's not defenses. I'm talking about players who are under 50% owned. So when I went on Friday, before the games, I went and I looked at which players were under 50% owned. I saw 45% owned next to Tajae Sharp's name. I really have no idea, how he is not owned in 55% of leagues, because this is a guy that dominated the snaps. Even if you go all the way back to OTAs, the Titans were talking about him, saying that he's starting. This is before the Kendall Wright injury. This is before Doyle Green Beckham was traded. He was a starter. This went into the preseason. He looked fantastic. And now in week 1, he played 64 snaps. The next closest wide receiver somehow was Harry Douglas with 37 snaps. Nathan, can you give us any reason to believe that Tajae Sharp is not a starting wide receiver on fantasy teams?
No, I think you definitely need to have Sharp. If he's available in your league, pick him up right away. I know Kendall Wright was out for this game, but he's going to be the one replacing Harry Douglas's snaps, right? I don't think we'll cut into Sharp snaps. And I think Sharp will be even better than he was in this game. Mariota wasn't very good in the game, very bad under pressure. So I think Mariota will get even better in the future, which with how many targets Sharp was seeing, that should just increase Sharp's numbers from what he had in week 1.
Yeah, and if you were paying attention in the preseason, Sharp was somebody that we talked about. Like I said, I don't know how he was not owned in 55% of leagues, but if he's out there, he is my top ad. Like this week 1 is not – usually it's a big waiver wire week. I don't feel like it's a huge week for waiver wires. I feel like if you have the number 1 priority and you want to hold it, I'm fine with that. But if Tajae Sharp's available, you have to spend like a lot of money, right, Brandon? Like he's a must add in all formats. And I'm willing to spend – I think you should spend – if you're in a fab, what's the max percentage that you would spend on Tajae Sharp?
Oh, I'm a terrible person to ask for this. I'm so conservative. I'm spending like $20 max on anyone ever. I don't think I've ever spent more than that on anyone. I'm dead serious. I mean, I know that that's not, realistic, and you're probably not going to get him if that's the case. But especially week 1, I get a little nervous. But to me, yes, the only problem, again, is Marcus Mariota, in my opinion. This is not a fluke. I think this may be who he is. I think that the ceiling is set by Mariota for Tajae Sharp, and that makes me a little bit nervous. And they are going to run the ball. They didn't run the ball as effectively as people thought they would, but they were going up against a rather tough defense. The Minnesota Vikings are legit. And I said this is why I was okay with them trading for Sam Bradford, because it helped the team feel like at least they're trying, that they still believe they can make the Super Bowl. And I think that they're not crazy. I think the Minnesota Vikings have a great team, and defensively, I think they have a fantastic team. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see. Marcus Mariota, his decision-making skills aren't the best, in my opinion. But yes, I had Tashard Sharp in a ton of leagues. I think because he was a rookie and an unfamiliar name. I know that sounds crazy, but I've actually done like psychological studies on people as to like the familiarity of the name makes you feel like you are more familiar with that person. And I think that's the same thing for fantasy players because they're not familiar with him because he's a rookie. So then they're like, oh, I don't know. So literally psychology-wise, I believe that that's why he's not owned. And he absolutely should get picked up. Yeah, I mean, I guess, okay, maybe you can spend more than $20. But again, you're talking the most conservative fab money person ever. But you know what? I always get people in week 10 when I need them.
Well, me, if you're looking for, so let's say your team is wide receiver, like lacking. Let's say you were already thin at wide receiver and you just lost Keenan Allen. I'm willing to spend 50% of my free agent acquisition budget on Tashard Sharp. I do believe he's going to be a starter. I think he's a wide receiver 3 in fantasy with upside in certain weeks. But the part that puzzled me was really the usage of Andre Johnson. He saw 7 targets on his 24 snaps. And you look at Delaney Walker, he just saw 4 targets all game. It was kind of puzzling. It was a weird game for them. Kudos to Minnesota for the game plan. Obviously, they did something to throw them off track. I actually believe that Mariota is a buy low candidate. I think Mariota is a fine quarterback, and I think he'll be okay. He just played a really good defense. But one player that we've seen a lot of, we just talked about Tashard Sharp, who's a rookie. One player who we've seen a ton of over the years is Mike Wallace. Mike Wallace is a guy who finished as a top 28 fantasy wide receiver in every single year, with exception to Minnesota last year. So when you saw him go to the Ravens, for me, it clicked a lot of lights. Like Brashad Perriman hasn't practiced very much. He hasn't been with the team very much. Kamar Aiken was good. Yeah, I get it. And I just don't know if I believe in Steve Smith. Nathan, what's going on with this Baltimore Ravens team? Do you think that Mike Wallace is somebody that everyone should add to their fantasy teams, or is it more of like I'm not really buying it. I think it was just one big play.
Yeah, I'm not really buying Mike Wallace. I do think he'll be fairly inconsistent from one week to another. The snaps were fairly evenly split between Smith and Wallace and Aiken, with Perriman getting a bit less than all 3 of those guys. But I think Wallace is someone who's inconsistent because he's that deep ball threat. He had the one big play in the game, and I don't think he'll have that every week. And then also something that I like with wide receivers is looking at the matchups, who they're going to face each week, who they're likely to line up across. And Baltimore was someone they didn't have a consistent slot guy. They were rotating all 3 of those guys in the slot, moving all of them around. So you won't know from one week to another who they're going to be lining up against. So both of those kind of inconsistent things makes me want to go with a wide receiver that I know will at least be on the field. I know who they'll go up against, so I'll have an idea of what the matchup will be. But with Wallace, he's too inconsistent for him to be someone I want on my roster.
Yeah, no, I figured he matched Flacco's skill set extremely well. And, I believe he will be inconsistent. At the end of the year, he'll probably be a top 35 wide receiver by default, just because he will make those splash plays from time to time. I think one player that I think is going to be dropped in a lot of leagues that I think it's wrong to do so is Kamar Aiken. Kamar Aiken, he was out there for a majority of the snaps. Like, I think he was the slot guy when they were 3 wide majority of the time. Steve Smith is done. For me, I would rather cut Steve Smith than cut Kamar Aiken. Steve Smith saw 8 targets in this game, 5 catches for 19 yards. Like, he's a bad Theo Riddick right now. I mean, he's a short route guy. I just don't think he's got it. He was a little.
Don't you dare bash Theo Riddick.
He was. Yeah, I was about to say. I mean, Theo Riddick. That's probably an insult to him at this point in his career. We got a few players to go through. So Mike Wallace. Nathan's telling you that. Be a little weary of him. He's probably going to have some up and downs. It's more of like a bye-week replacement type player. One player that in PPR leagues that you should probably have an eye out for, I'm going to throw this one to Brandon because I know she's dying to talk about the 49ers, Jeremy Kerley. And for me, the reason that Jeremy Kerley could be a legit player, like think about this last night, okay? They were a team that was up throughout the entire game. So the script was pretty bad for all pass catchers like Torrey Smith. But Bruce Ellington, I said I was going to say Bruce Ellington.
I know, you should be.
Jeremy Kerley, 11 targets in a negative game script. What is going on? Are you excited about Jeremy Kerley? Do you think this is legit?
Of course I am. I have him in a ton of leagues. I literally was like, okay, bye, Bruce. I'll get you, Jeremy. To me, it's all the same. Chip Kelly sees nothing other than the slot. He just doesn't understand the rest of the offense, frankly, as far as I'm concerned. Literally, the guy only has eyes for the slot. He loves it. It's Jeremy Kerley all day, every day. Look at Jordan Matthews, who, by the way, also had a great week 1. They're using him really well. Doug Peterson loves short yardage. Systems, it's so important. And I know Nathan can really, talk to that. But if you understand what the coach wants to do, you know what players they're going to target. And to me, Jeremy Kerley is an easy add. Unfortunately, San Francisco not great at football and not always playing the Rams. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be a little tough week in and week out. But I think the one thing that's going to stay constant are those short passes. And when they get down, they actually still don't throw down the field. They do the short passes in the Chip Kelly offense. It's all about the speed. It's all about the speed, little chunks. And Kerley actually looked decent. I mean, it's hard to know who looked decent and who didn't in that game. It was just really rough to watch. But the point is that I actually think that this is a legitimate guy to me of the whole slate. To me, Tajay Sharp and Jeremy Kerley are guaranteed, along with Will Fuller if he's on your waiver wire, which is, in my opinion, loco. But if that happens, fine. Those 3 players to me have a role in a way that most of the other waiver wire ads do not.
Yeah, no, it's time for me as a Torrey Smith truther to come out and say I'm in panic mode. It was not like we said, this was not a game script for him, for the type of receiver he is. But you have to wonder if Blaine Gabbert is going to be the one to take the shots downfield. At this point, I think for Torrey Smith, you'd be lucky to get Colin Kaepernick in there as his quarterback.
Yes.
But we're going to see as the weeks go on, we're going to see more and more matchups that are tougher and tougher, where the game script will fit. So I'm not fully off board, but I am definitely in panic mode as a Torrey Smith guy. We're going to talk about one other wide receiver that maybe should be on your bench in preparation for if something bad happens. But first, let's get a word from our sponsors. All right, so I wrote an article earlier this offseason, Nathan, talking about I think there were like 5 or 6 wide receivers who were one injury away from being super fantasy relevant. I'm talking like they would be top 25, top 30 guys automatically if a wide receiver were to get hurt in front of them. But now we're starting to wonder if these 2 guys might have value now. Let's start, Nathan. We're going to start with one. We're going to start in Indianapolis. We're going to talk about Phillip Dorsett. Was this more a product of game script where it was a high-scoring game? But then again, you could say that's going to be every single week with the Colts and their defense. They're really, really bad, in bad shape, like probably worse than any other NFL team at the DB position. But Phillip Dorsett, is he going to be involved automatically just because of how bad their defense is?
Yeah, I think definitely part of it was game script. But like you said, we'll probably see this game script a lot this season. I think Dorsett will continue to see a lot of playing time, continue to see a lot of targets. The only thing that I'd be slightly concerned about is Andrew Luck wasn't just good in this game. He was off the charts excellent in this game, and I don't see Andrew Luck being quite that good every single week. So I don't know if all of the targets that Dorsett will see will be quite as good as the targets he saw in this one, but definitely a promising sign for Dorsett, and especially if a wide receiver got hurt, like you said, then he'd be on the field even more, see even more targets. So definitely, if you're not adding him now, definitely keep an eye on him.
Yeah, that's my take on bench situations, where if you have a bench and you have it full of guys like Steve Smith and stuff like that, get rid of those guys. Like, they're not going to help you win a fantasy title. Guys like Phillip Dorsett are guys that can help you win a fantasy title. There was a play during that Colts game where T.Y. Hilton caught a pass. It was inside the red zone, and he fell down, and he came down. He caught the ball weird, but then he came up grabbing his arm. When I saw that happen, I was like, oh my God, Phillip Dorsett is going to be like the guy. Like, he's going to be the waiver wire ad. I love Dante Moncrief, and he's going to be the touchdown guy, but Phillip Dorsett was going to step. He's almost a clone of T.Y. Hilton. So I think the offensive line did a lot better than we expected them to in Indianapolis. It was a little bit, overstated, I guess, the demise of their offensive line. I mean, Dwayne Allen was even able to go out and run some routes. Jack Doyle. Let's talk about Jack Doyle for a moment.
Must we?
Yeah. No, we do, Brandon. You have to tell everybody why Jack Doyle is not a waiver wire ad, because he's going to be popular in leagues. Understand that he's going to be a very popular waiver wire ad because people think that because he's white and he's a tight end on the Colts that he's going to be Coby Fleener to Andrew Luck. Could you explain to them why Jack Doyle is not a good pickup?
Well, I mean, I don't. The problem is that this week was horrible for tight ends in general, so people are freaking out. I mean, that's really what's going on here, right? I mean, Gary Barnidge, 0 catches, 2 drops, like Mayday. And it's like, no, don't worry. Josh McCown's coming to save your fantasy team. It's fine. Mm-hmm. There's some people that you're just kind of freaking out about. But, listen, he's not going to score 2 touchdowns every week. Dwayne Allen is the guy. The only thing that concerns me about Dwayne Allen, that has always concerned me about Dwayne Allen, is that if that offensive line does not hold up, they need him to block. They're going to need Dwayne Allen to be a blocking baller, because otherwise Andrew Luck's going to get hurt. And just like Nathan said, Andrew Luck is playing lights out right now, and that's what they want. They want him to play well. But when he gets hurt, even just like kind of bumped up, we saw that last season, his productivity goes down big time. So, I mean, listen, I just don't think that there are going to be 2 tight ends that are going to be fantasy relevant. And by the way, Coby Fleener wasn't very good last year.
No, he was not with Matt Hasselbeck. Not with Matt Hasselbeck, he wasn't.
Sure, but I mean, other people were good last year with Matt Hasselbeck. They weren't fantastic, but they were better than Coby Fleener. We're not even going to get into Coby Fleener in this show. We're not going to do it, because we all know what my feelings are, and I stand by them, and I will continue standing by them. But I will say, to me, Jack Doyle was a cool specialty play with an Andrew Luck playing on fire myself. But Nathan, please, I mean, I would love to hear your take on him.
Yeah, I think Doyle's still more of a blocking tight end. He still stayed into pass block on a third of the pass plays that he was in for. He only saw 4 targets in this game, so it just happened to be that 2 of his targets ended up as touchdowns. So I don't see him getting the yards you want, and yeah, he'll occasionally score another touchdown or 2, but you won't know when those will happen, and I don't think he'll get the yardage you want out of the tight end.
No, it's true. And actually, I found out that Dwayne Allen was hurt for part of. He was dealing with something with his hip, I want to say, where he missed some time, and that's when Doyle actually did his damage. So the day for Dwayne Allen could have been even bigger last week. It's the reason that I loved him going into the year. The tight end position will get some targets there, and if something were to happen to Allen, that's the time where I'd grab Doyle. But right now, do not pay attention to that. But Brandon, after making you talk about Jack Doyle for a moment, I'll give you a more exciting player to talk about. Let's talk about Mohamed Sanu. He looked really good. I mean, we talked. I was wondering if they'd play him in the slot or if that was truly Justin Hardy's role. But no, they did in fact roll Mohamed Sanu into the slot quite a bit, and it could be a recurring thing, because you look at Julio Jones. What the Bucs did in the first half last week is they basically bracketed Julio Jones. They said, we're not going to let this guy beat us. Basically the opposite of what the Redskins did with Antonio Brown. But what do you think of Mohamed Sanu going forward? Is he somebody that he's atop your waiver wire ads?
Yes, but first of all, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of money, because Kyle Shanahan is really a 1 wide receiver, 1 running back kind of guy. And last week they got their butts kicked because they did a running back by committee, and they also did a 2 wide receiver, 1-2 punch. He's not very good at game planning for that. He hasn't been his entire career. I would not be surprised if he didn't go back to being a little more predictable but productive. And again, the defense did dictate some of that game. Mohamed Sanu did have 2 drops. I do want to put that out there. So that is not exceedingly promising. My problem with Mohamed Sanu off of waivers is that people are going to overspend on him. And then he's going to have games where he has 1 catch for 13 yards, maybe. So unfortunately, I'm just leery about Kyle Shanahan and his history with wide receiver 2s. He just doesn't pay attention to them enough for me to feel confident starting him week in and week out. Mohamed Sanu is a perfect person to have on your bench for bye weeks with a high ceiling, but I just think his floor is going to be really low. But I think, hey, this was a ceiling game. He was great. I don't have any problems with him. I just think someone's going to spend a lot of money, and I'm going to let them do it.
Well, Brandon, you and I were talking before the show started about Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman, that situation. I want you to share with everyone what you were saying, because I think it's important. We're talking about waiver wires this week, and I'm sure Tevin Coleman was probably, added. He's probably already on many fantasy teams. But explain to them why you don't think people should overreact about this one game of Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman.
Yeah, and again, I'd love to hear Nathan's take on this. But, the problem is Devonta Freeman's average depth per target was negative 1.3 yards. He had to get all of that yardage on his own. And then he averaged 1.8 yards per carry, but he also averaged 1.8 yards per carry after contact. That's the same number. I think that the way that the game script was, again, the Tampa Bay defense did a really good job. I think that we're underestimating actually what Tampa Bay did, especially in the first half of that game. they really decided to key in on Devonta Freeman. So I believe that it only made sense that they would, of course, rotate in and do more to Coleman. Coleman had a big play, and congratulations. But other than that, it's not like he was taking that job and running with it. I do not think that that's the case. I think you're looking at one big play here that happened, and it was a great play. But I think that what the situation Devonta Freeman was in is not something that is going to happen every single week. I don't think that people are going to be able to contain Julio Jones that way every single week and be able to key in on the run as well. So they did get game tape, though, on Tampa Bay, so they are going to see how it's done. But, I don't think this is a Freeman issue. This is an offensive line issue. This is a team issue. This is a play-calling issue. You should never have a negative number for your depth per aimed throw. That is insane to me. So I just feel bad for him. I just think he was in a bad position.
Nathan, what's your take on the running back situation there in Atlanta?
Yeah, I'm not concerned about Freeman's production. I think Freeman will be able to bounce back from this game, do a lot better in terms of yards on his carries. But I am concerned about how much playing time Coleman got in this game. I do think the Falcons like Coleman more than we do, so I think Coleman will continue to eat into Freeman's playing time more than we'd like to see. So I think that'll limit Freeman's carries, but I definitely think in terms of yards, Freeman will definitely bounce back from this in touchdowns as well.
Yeah, I think it was just a bad game by Freeman overall. And I'm not going to overreact to one game. I actually came out with a fantasy stock market today talking about Devonta Freeman and how Tevin Coleman, yes, Brandon, you said it, 50% of his receiving yards were on one play. It was a solid play. Like, we know that Tevin Coleman is a splash player. He's going to make those plays from time to time. But Devonta Freeman, let's not, my biggest issue with the Devonta Freeman haters right now is that they're pointing to his yards per carry over, the last part of last year and then in week one. Well, we could do the same thing with Tevin Coleman this week. It's not like he blew the doors off. He actually added more as a receiver than I thought he would, which will take a little bit off the top, but I still make no mistake. I still see Devonta Freeman as a low-end RB1 in PPR leagues. I don't take that away from him. I know there's some people out there saying that he's outside the top 20 now. I think that's a little crazy. So yeah, I'm with you. But Nathan, I want to comment on that impressive backdrop that you have behind you right now, because I see all these figurines. Is that skinny Eddie Lacy up top, or is that 2016 version?
Oh, that's skinny Eddie Lacy. I got that one a couple of years ago.
Yeah, by the way, Eddie Lacy did not lose any weight. When you
why do they keep saying that? It's embarrassing.
No, I don't know. And they're like, oh, he's really in shape. I'm like, he looks more and more like Mike Tolbert this year. I'm not saying that sarcastically. I mean that. Eddie Lacy looks like a big dude, very, very big. Am I wrong?
He's always been big.
But bigger. He looks bigger. Yeah. Not smaller. Not slimmed down version, blow up version. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. All right. So one situation that we talked about the Ravens already at the wide receiver position, but one surprise for me, leading up to the season, we were talking about either once Ben Watson got hurt, it was either Max Williams or it was going to be Crockett Gilmore. I thought it was Crockett Gilmore. As it turns out, it's Dennis Pitta. He played a pretty poor game, according to our analysts. Nathan, did you have a chance to look at this game? What did you take away from Pitta?
Yeah, first off, I was definitely surprised at how much he was used. I've had him in a dynasty league for years, just sitting on injured reserve, waiting for him to come back, and he's finally back. But we did grade him fairly poorly, but a lot more of that had to do with his blocking than his receiving. Just didn't do a good job run blocking, and that has no effect on his fantasy performance. For how much he was on the field, he didn't see quite as many targets as I might have liked. I think it was just 4 in the game. But I'm guessing in games where the Ravens have to pass more, he'll be a bigger part of the passing offense. So I think he's definitely, if you're looking for a tight end off the waiver wire, someone you should definitely consider.
Yeah, he's definitely a name that I would peek at, just because there has been some value over the years at the Ravens tight end position. And obviously Flacco has been around Dennis Pitta for a long time. It's one of those weird things. But Mark Trestman does use the tight end, so I'm curious to see it. I don't know if I'm adding Pitta just yet. I'm probably waiting a week. But sticking with the tight end position, Brandon, Austin Seferian-Jenkins is so talented.
So frustrating.
So frustrating, yes, that's part of it. But is he someone that people should maybe almost an anticipatory ad in leagues, or is it more of we need to wait till he's on the field more?
So it's funny. I have it set right now, our fantasy stats here on Pro Football Focus. And everyone that played in at least 25% of the snaps is shown. Austin Seferian-Jenkins isn't even on this list. How crazy is that? He's not even playing in 25% of the snaps. So he's not even, so I have to change my settings to be able to see him. I mean, like, come on now. This is him. He's going to have big games. By the way, he usually starts off strong. He usually has like a big game in like weeks 1 or 2, and then he disappears for 5 weeks. Then he comes back another game. I mean, for me, I think there are better options. I think this was, again, a very tough week for tight ends across the board. Also, a lot of people were not paying attention to the news. Clive Walford was not listed as the starter. That ended up being legitimate. Coby Fleener struggled during the preseason. That ended up being legitimate. RG3 is RG3, also real life. So I think that what happened is people got kind of taken aback by certain things. So I could understand if you're in a deep league adding him, but I don't know. To me, he's so boom or bust. He's more of a DFS play for me than someone that I personally would want on my roster. But that's also about how I play fantasy football. So.
You know what's crazy to me is that if you had like 20 yards and a touchdown at tight end this week, you would have finished as a top 5 tight end.
Yeah. It was really bad week. Really bad.
It really was. And it's honestly, it's becoming an issue like where, people are throwing darts at tight end, so you want those guys that are going to be targeted. That's why, Brandon, I'm not totally freaking out over Coby Fleener. As a matter of fact, I'm buying low on Coby Fleener. I think that'll just
I saw that in your article. I was like, God love you, Mike.
No, I know. And like the thing is, I'll admit when I'm wrong. Like Torrey Smith, I'm really in panic mode. But Coby Fleener, he's going to be fine. They paid him a lot of money. In that offense, I know what they do. And it's going to be hit or miss. Willie Snead's going to be hit or miss too, guys. So don't automatically assume that Willie Snead's going to just be this.
You think Willie Snead is comparable to Coby Fleener as hit or miss?
I am in the Saints offense.
Nathan's
100%.
giggling right now. He's like, no, that's real. Willie Snead is real. Willie Snead also had a fantastic preseason. He had a ton of targets, and he's done so much with them.
Yes, no, it was an ideal game script for Willie Snead. It was a great matchup. He had the best cornerback matchup of all 3 wide receivers. Willie Snead is a player. I'm not dissing his talent. It's the same reason Brandon Cooks isn't a wide receiver 1 in fantasy for me. It's the same reason Willie Snead is not a wide receiver 2. Coby Fleener, he's going to have his ups and downs, but what tight end doesn't in this league is my point. So Michael Thomas also played a ton of snaps. Michael Thomas is probably somebody that's owning.
I love Michael Thomas. He's a pickup for me.
No, he is. And he actually played on the outside, whereas Willie Snead went into the slot quite a bit. So, but let's close out the show with a couple quarterbacks that we're going to talk about. One that hasn't even played a snap, but I really do think that he's probably the top waiver wire ad at quarterback, and that's Josh McCown. Nathan, you want to talk about Josh McCown, what he did last year with this Browns offense? And the thing is, now you're looking at Hugh Jackson. You're adding in, Duke Johnson as somewhat of a full-time player. You're adding Terrell Pryor, who can stretch the field. We know that Josh McCown, what he did with Alshon Jeffrey, with Brandon Marshall in Chicago, he's willing to throw the ball down the field. Add in Corey Coleman, and you got Josh Gordon coming back in a couple games. Gary Barnidge. Like, there's a funnel effect here. And can the Browns offense succeed through Josh McCown?
Yeah, I think especially fantasy-wise, we know McCown's not an excellent quarterback, but he's not a terrible one either. He's someone that, as you said, he's going to be surrounded with talent. I'm looking forward to Josh Gordon coming back in a few weeks. The Browns are a team that, even though they lost some linemen, they do have a great offensive line in front of him, so there won't be as much pressure for him, so he'll be able to throw the ball without defensive linemen in his face. And then the Browns' defense is a very young one, so they'll probably be giving up a decent amount of points, especially early this year. So then the Browns will be needing to throw late to catch up and have the weapons to throw to catch up. So that should add up to a ton of yards and hopefully some touchdowns here and there. So I think he's someone that, if he's going in the right matchup, he's someone you want on your bench so that you're ready to start him if the matchup allows you to start him.
Yeah, and I think if you're a Browns pass catcher, you're excited about this, right, Brandon?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, specifically Gary Barnidge, the majority of his touchdowns, the majority of his yardage all came when Josh McCown was in last year. They just have a really good connection. And not only that, but, I kind of wrote about this. So I do a column on Mondays that's basically relax or panic on all the kind of dud performances. And one of the ones that I said was, kind of panic on Gary, because at the time we didn't know about RG3, but I said, listen, if RG3's hurt, this is actually the biggest relax that I could tell you, because the productivity was just stark when you look at his game splits with or without Josh McCown. And not only that, but he was very involved in the preseason as well and had 0 drops as opposed to the 2 drops that he had on his 2 targets in week 1. It was bad. It was really bad. So, but, I think he's going to be fine. I also would like to say that Isaiah Crowell is oddly enough in leagues with short benches available in some places. And I do not think that's going to change. I think it will be better for Duke Johnson. It will be better for Gary Barnidge. But I do believe that Isaiah Crowell is going to carry the ball a lot. And he's going to score. He's going to be the guy. He's the Jeremy Hill of this offense. I kept saying this. I don't understand. So also, if he was on your bench and you didn't start him, I think depending on matchups, I think he's your starter. I started him in some leagues. I mean, I think that's a legitimate workload.
I think this week is one where you might have to wonder about that. They're going up against the Ravens, and that it's funny how it segues into this because we want to talk about Joe Flacco. And I think Joe Flacco, if you're looking for a long-term option at the quarterback position, I think that Josh McCown is probably the one I would add. But if we're talking about strictly this week, Joe Flacco, I think, is the one you want to add. They're going up against that Browns team. This is a Browns defense that they just allowed Carson Wentz to light them up in his first NFL start. On top of that, we look at last year what they did. 12 games, they allowed multiple passing touchdowns. There were 6 of them where they allowed 3 or more passing touchdowns. So, Brandon, is this a week where you're totally on board with Joe Flacco and that you can start him confidently?
Yeah, I am. Joe Flacco, traditionally, I looked over his 2015 numbers, his 2014 numbers. When he plays bad defenses, he normally gets a lot of fantasy points. And when he plays good defenses, he does not. It's kind of the opposite for players like Ryan Tannehill. And there are a lot of other players that could be very frustrating. But Joe Flacco is one that usually you can read. He is very predictable. So, yeah, it's obviously if you're in a 2-quarterback league, it's fantastic. But if you've been someone that, streaming that Tyrod Taylor, getting a little nervous, and I'm with you. If Tyrod Taylor does not have Sammy Watkins, I just want to say this on this waiver wire show. You need to drop him. I don't understand. There are too many other quarterbacks in the league if you're in a regular redraft league. Just that, I'm sorry. I loved him too. Sammy Watkins not being healthy, game has changed. So, so for me, Flacco's fine. If you're a streamer, I got a league where I started Matt Ryan this week. I felt great about it. I was streaming. Yes. I'm just riding the stream, but it's all about, but don't start him over Drew Brees or something. I'll get these wacky questions too. People will be like, oh, well, he has a better matchup. I'm like, he's not Drew Brees. So I'm going to stand by that. But yeah, sure.
No, all right. So Nathan, who would you rather start? Would you rather take Joe Flacco this week, or would you start in someone like Kirk Cousins against they're playing the Cowboys this week?
Well, that's another bad defense.
I'd probably stick with Joe Flacco going up against the Browns. The Browns don't have as much of a pass rush. Their coverage, their cornerbacks didn't have a great game against Philadelphia. I don't quite trust their safeties yet. So I think the Ravens with Joe Flacco. I know I said I didn't trust Mike Wallace earlier, but if there's one game where I might trust him, this might be the one. So I'd take Joe Flacco here, though.
It's insane how fast Joe Hayden's career turned around. He went from stud, lockdown, shutdown cornerback to a guy that you want to target in matchups. I don't think that we can leave this show without talking about what Carson Wentz and Jimmy Garoppolo did in week 1. Jimmy Garoppolo played a fantastic defense. He did well. He was composed. I guess all those reps in the preseason really paid off because they did play him extensively. But if you're looking at it and someone's saying, you know what, I want to be out in front of this, I believe that both Carson Wentz and Garoppolo are they're quarterbacks of the future. Which one would you add right now? Both of you guys, I want you to chime in. Which one would you add, Brandon?
Oh, clearly Carson Wentz, because this is the whole season.
It is the whole season.
As opposed to Jimmy Garoppolo, where I have 3 more games. And I think that what happened is, first of all, I just also wrote a fantasy devil's advocate piece here, but Bill Belichick is a warlock. He has black magic, and it's what he does, and he's a genius. It's unbelievable. What he did is he came out and he said, you know what, we're going to pass heavy early. We're going to make them respect the pass so that we can use the Garrett Blunt. It was a beautiful game script. And he made sure that these passes were to Julian Edelman, who has stick them on his hands. No, he doesn't. Don't go to him out of but it feels like it. And so, the guy is so reliable, and they decided that the Arizona Cardinals were not going to prepare appropriately, and they didn't. The Cardinals were a huge disappointment defensively. They did not prepare appropriately for Bill Belichick, for Jimmy, for anybody. So I don't think that's going to happen in that way again. Now they do have an easy schedule. But as far as I'm concerned, Carson Wentz is the whole season. And Cleveland was really bad, so he won't be that good. But he is definitely the starter. They're throwing their support towards him. With Jimmy, they're throwing their support like, just get us to Tom, man. So to me, it's a no question. But yeah, but congratulations, Jimmy G. You're going to get overpaid during the offseason, and I hope it's not my team that does
it. And Nathan, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely go with Wentz. Even though it was the Browns defense, I think Wentz was even more impressive than what his numbers showed. He had a lot of passes that were dropped that probably won't keep up. He had a couple of passes that were batted that won't happen again or won't happen as much again. So I think Wentz was extremely impressive, probably one of the most impressive Week 1 rookie quarterback performances we've seen in a while, probably since around Cam Newton. So Wentz is someone that I think can keep this up week in and week out.
I think that's a good place to end this show, guys. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure to follow us on Twitter. Nathan, you're at PFF_Nate Jahnke. Is that right?
Yeah, _ Nate Jahnke, NateJahnke.
Jahnke. I'm going to remember that because I remember Moore told me, he's like, Mike, why didn't you tell me it was Tagliere? And then Brandon, you want to go ahead and give your Twitter handle so I don't screw yours up?
Yeah, my name's really boring unless I wasn't a woman. So, yeah, it's at Brandon, her FFB, as in her fantasy football.
And myself at Mike Tagliere, NFL. Guys, next week we're going to be back with this Waiver Wire show. Every single week we're going to be here talking about it. I think it was a rather boring week for Waiver Wire ads, especially for Week 1. But there are some guys to be had there. My favorite, Tajay Sharp, if he's available. And then you look further down the road, I'm sure Brandon's all over Jeremy Kerley. Nathan might be over Phillip Dorsett. But guys, we hope you enjoyed the show. Until next time, lights out.